lied to federal investigators. You try that, you'd wind up in jail. So why criticize these guys? Because they deserve it. But let's say a federal prosecutor asked you the very same question using this language, quote, "What is the reason for your continued criticism of Mr. Comey and his former deputy, Andrew G. McCabe?" See how the tone is different there? Suddenly, it's ominous. It sounds more like a threat than a question. What's the point of asking that, you might wonder? Since when is criticizing FBI officials a crime in this country? Well, apparently since Robert Mueller became special counsel. According to the New York Times, that's one of more than 40 questions Mueller plans to ask the president under penalty of perjury. Here's another one. Quote, "What was your opinion of Mr. Comey during the transition?" Huh? Your opinion? Whose business is that? Aren't Americans allowed to have any opinion they want without being grilled by law enforcement about it? And then there's this question, quote, "What was the purpose of your July 2017 criticism of Mr. Sessions?" Again, criticism of a government official framed as a crime, as if dissenting views aren't allowed or must be justified to a prosecutor. What country is this anyway? In fact, the president is allowed to have any opinion he wants of anyone who works for him. That is true of all presidents. They get to hire and fire their own appointees for their own reasons. If you don't like it, don't vote for them. This is a democracy. Trump got elected. Mueller didn't. Presidents also get to formulate their own policies. Voters can decide whether they agree with those policies. Again, that's why we have elections. Yet here are two more Mueller questions. Listen to these. Quote, "What discussions did you have during the campaign regarding Russian sanctions?" And, quote, "What involvement did you have concerning 2016 Republican platform changes regarding arming Ukraine?" So let's review. Trump ran for office promising to improve our relationship with Russia. He said that frequently and in public. Voters heard it, they agreed with him, and he won. But permanent Washington hated the idea of getting closer to Russia. They've been pushing a war with Iran for years. That's obvious now. Closer ties with Russia would make an Iran war far more complicated. Putin had to be the archvillain, the most evil man in the world. Never mind China or Mexico or other countries whose behavior is actually hurting the United States. Russia needed to be our enemy, a country with an economy the size of Texas that can't make a working escalator. They needed to be evil no matter what voters said they wanted. And so that happened. The policies that Trump ran on are now considered evidence of a crime. America is that much closer to war with Iran. Mission accomplished. Byron York is chief political correspondent at the Washington Examiner. Tom Fitton is president of Judicial Watch. They join us both tonight. Tom, first to you. You read these questions. Your reaction was what?
Well, you have to wonder what Mueller's up to here. Is he acting as a special counsel? You read these questions, you might be curious as to the answers if you were a journalist or a politician trying to attack Donald Trump. But for a prosecutor to be putting out questions like this and to demand the time of the President of the United States is an abuse of his power. And Mueller's just wandering around bumping into walls, investigatively speaking. There's not much here in the way of Russia collusion. Asking his opinions and questions about his tweets, to me, is a waste of time and the President's time. And I can't imagine a judge is going to allow him to force the president to have to answer many of these questions since they're so off kilter from any legitimate legal analysis or legal prosecution that he might be able to bring.
Well, they're confusing at the very least to non-lawyers like me looking at this. Byron, do they suggest a direction? What do they tell?
For a prosecutor to be putting out questions like this and to demand the time of the President of the United States is an abuse of his power. And Mueller's just wandering around bumping into walls, investigatively speaking. There's not much here in the way of Russia collusion. Asking his opinions and questions about his tweets, to me, is a waste of time and the President's time. And I can't imagine a judge is going to allow him to force the president to have to answer many of these questions since they're so off kilter from any legitimate legal analysis or legal prosecution that he might be able to bring.
Well, they're confusing at the very least to non-lawyers like me looking at this. Byron, do they suggest a direction? What do they tell us, assuming they're real, about the direction of this investigation?
Well, first of all, it's not just a group of 40-something questions. It's a potentially unlimited number of questions. When they say, well, when did you first find out about that June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower? Doesn't that naturally lead to who told you? What did they say the purpose was? How many people were involved? Did they tell you what happened? I mean, each question, which seems kind of benign and open-ended, can lead to all sorts of additional questions. But I think what you were getting at in your introduction is a point that we've seen seen a lot, which is asking Trump's motivations for the perfectly normal actions of a president. We've seen that in other court cases, from the travel ban to DACA to other things, in which the legitimate exercise of presidential power is questioned because the president apparently had some sort of unacceptable motive, and that's what's involved.
So that's a theological debate, not a political or policy debate. Are you pure-hearted? That's not really the concern of federal prosecutors, is it?
Right. Well, that's because everybody knows that he had the power to fire the director of the FBI, or he has the power to rake his attorney general over the coals. Whether or not that's a good idea is completely separate. The question here with Comey seems to be, what was your state of mind when you were doing that? If you did that with a pure intention, okay by me, but if you did it with a bad intention, you could be in deep trouble.
Are you Martin Luther? I mean, this is like bizarre for a secular government to pursue that line of questioning. So
Mueller's even asking about, what did you think of my appointment? What was your reaction to my appointment? He's asking about himself.
This is like a Playboy questionnaire. Yeah. What are your greatest strengths? What are your turnoffs?
Go ahead.
It's bizarre, but does it tell us? I mean, I think the key question is this investigation moving in the direction from which it started, which is an investigation into collusion, purportedly, with the Russian government during the campaign? Do you get that sense from these questions?
I just see this as the kind of the fantasy list of Fusion GPS, Adam Schiff type questions. They're pushing that narrative that's been out there, and you look at this and you got to wonder, forget about the FISA court misusing this dossier or these vague questions on Russia, his business dealings in Russia, and just taking this, as I said, this anti-Trump media narrative and bringing it into the prosecutorial function of the Justice Department. It's a real abuse, and Rod Rosenstein needs to be held accountable for unleashing this on the American people, the presidency, and the Justice Department.
Hard to see how it's made the country better. Is it, I haven't checked, Byron, you're very current with the law, is it a crime to say sympathetic things toward Russia?
As far as I know, absolutely not.
Okay.
So this list of questions, I have to say I completely lost my train of thought on this.
Does it seem like this is moving, however, toward what we were promised at the outset, which is an examination of whether Russia played a significant role in our election?
The thing to remember about this is there's not a whole lot new in these questions. When you look at some of the areas Michael Flynn, Comey's session about for the last year or so. So from that point, it seems to me that the Trump people should be somewhat relieved in the sense that we seem to know everything that he is talking about.
It sounds like a Morning Joe segment. I mean, I've totally lost interest. You know what I mean? Like, Carter Page was not subverting democracy. I just don't, you haven't convinced me.
Well, the House Intelligence Committee found the other day that there was no evidence of collusion, and there's nothing in this list of questions to suggest that Mueller has info that the House Intelligence Committee didn't.
They were covering up for Vladimir Putin. Well, okay, just so you know. Gentlemen, thank you.
You're welcome
for that. Fleet Brains, of course, a longtime advisor to Hillary Clinton, both at the Department of State and on various campaign trails across the fruited plain. He joins us tonight. So here are the questions that, why are you criticizing Jim Comey and Andy McCabe? Is that an appropriate line of questioning for a federal prosecutor who can put you in jail?
Well, my question is, imagine if you, Byron, and Tom were sitting here talking about the FBI giving Hillary Clinton all the questions they were going to ask before they interviewed her. I have a feeling you would not say that's great. So let's take a step back.
Can I just be clear? Yeah. I defended on this show repeatedly, or on this Fox Air, repeatedly, Hillary Clinton's campaign against Jim Comey because I thought he was unfair to her. I'd eat broken glass before I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I think the abuse of law enforcement power is really scary, and I think he abused it. I said so at the time. But what world is it where a federal prosecutor asks any politician, why are you criticizing a federal official so much? Is that a legitimate question?
Yeah, it is. It's a world where we have laws, and I think there's a,
we're not allowed to criticize our superiors now?
No,
okay.
but a president can't do anything they want. A president cannot obstruct justice, because if they could burn files, if they could fire people, if they just stop things, it would never end.
Here's the question. What is the reason for your continued criticism of Mr. Comey and his former deputy, Andrew G. McCabe?
Because
so why, just construct a scenario for me in which that would be a legitimate question. If we're starting with the supposition, and I am, that you're allowed under the First Amendment to criticize public officials, I think you are.
You are.
Why would he ask something like that?
Because a lot of it is trying to figure out what was on his mind when he fired Jim Comey. You're right, Jim Comey is in play. If he shows up late to work or if he doesn't do a good job, you fire him.
But I don't like his tie.
But you don't fire him when he's investigating you. That is not a legitimate reason to do so.
But that's not the question.
And by the way, if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be talking about this.
What is your reason for the continued criticism of Mr. Comey and his former deputy Andrew G. McCabe? If we had a functioning left in America that cared about civil liberties, they'd be having a heart attack over that, and they should be.
No, the heart attack they're having is the rule of law being trampled over, because obstruction of justice is all about what you intended. That's why they're asking.
So
they're not.
Explain to me why this.
This isn't a Playboy turn on, turn off. Robert Mueller's turnoffs are obstruction of justice and lying.
Look, I'm strongly for the rule of law. All laws. That's why I'm totally opposed to sanctuary cities and everything else the left is pushing right now. I would just say in this case, why are you criticizing a federal official does not lead us toward obstruction of justice. It leads us toward the chilling of public expression of opinion, which is a bigger principle, I think.
I don't think so, because the president hasn't been chilled or in any way reluctant to criticize.
Well, he doesn't care,
folks.
So that's like one of the reasons
if he doesn't care, then he should talk to Mueller.
But like, this is not an area that a prosecutor should ever wade into. This has to do with conscience.
So it's 2 hours out of his day where he can't watch television. Let him talk to Mueller.
Well, I just think it's terrifying. How about this? Why did you change the Republican platform in 2016? That's nobody's business. It's the Republican platform. It's not a federal document.
That's not true. If that was done because it was made favorable to Russia, if that was done because of some larger reason to...
That's all allowed. Our platforms
are not allowed to collude with a foreign nation.
Oh, really? Actually, that's where you're wrong. You know, because the Democratic platform is filled with data points that are there because foreign governments want them there. The Republican platform, same thing. The Republican platform calls for statehood for Puerto Rico. Why do you think that's there? Because Puerto Rican politicians push for it. So this is standard. I think it's wrong.
Puerto Ricans aren't walking into Don Jr.'s office and saying, here's email on Hillary Clinton.
But lots of other foreign representatives are. And it shows in our foreign policy, it shows in all kinds of decisions, and it definitely shows in the party platforms. That's not illegal. I think it's wrong. It's not illegal. So why the hell is he asking about that?
Again, because there are illegal elements to this. And by the way...
What's the illegal part of that?
If you have a quid pro quo between changing, because you don't know what other elements
it depends what the pro quo is. But I mean,
right, the pro quo could be money. The pro quo could be we're going to lift sanctions.
Then why doesn't he ask about that? By the way,
maybe he will.
Would you say, is it still legal to be for lifting sanctions against
Absolutely.
Russia? Oh, it is? Okay,
Absolutely.
because it sounds like what we're doing here is we're criminalizing policy differences.
No, I don't. That's not true at all.
Oh, you don't think so?
I don't. I really don't, because again, I sit here a lot of these times and I think, what would you be saying if it were Hillary Clinton?
Well, I can tell you once again, I defend
in terms of if you had heard that she had changed a position in the DNC,
but I know that she has, and I know that.
But you would assume the worst. You would assume that because Saudi Arabia gave some kind of contribution to the Clinton campaign, that it was some kind of quid pro quo, and that was horrible.
Yes, okay. And I think that happens all the time.
So why is he getting?
Unfortunately, it's not illegal. That's the point. Look,
I think the point is these are questions, not accusations. But if he goes in there and he says, "Look, I just don't believe we should be sanctioning Russia," that's the only reason I did it.
He said that on the campaign, and now he's treated as a criminal, a suck up to Putin. And by the way, let's be totally honest. How honest do you want to be?
Criminals don't get the questions ahead of time.
The attacks on his attempted changes to a Russia policy are related to the desire of many in Washington to wage war against Iran. Let's be honest. Can we be honest?
That's taking it to a multiple geopolitical level. This is where you do those things where you take it to China.
Oh, I'm crazy. Okay. You know I'm right, actually. Philippe, it's great to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
There's much more today on the Mueller revelations, which are amazing. Britt Hume joins us next on that. Plus, much more on the sad downturn of one of the most beautiful cities in the world, San Francisco. People are now literally shooting heroin on the subway, watching them right there. Is it at the point of no return? Is it Caracas? We've got an investigation on that, and it's just ahead.
Tucker Carlson is brought to you by Pacific Life, protecting generations of families for 150 years. That's the power of Pacific.
What is
Robert Mueller's investigation apparently has dozens of questions it wants to ask of President Trump, and now at least some of those questions have been leaked, we're not sure by whom, to the New York Times. What do they tell us about the investigation's current approach to the story? Well, to that we turn to Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume, who joins us tonight. So, Britt, this is really a procedural question, but it's been the obsession of the press all day. Do we know where these questions came from?
I don't think we do, but I do know that our senior White House correspondent, John Roberts, has confirmed their authenticity, so we can trust that these questions reflect what Robert Mueller's line of questioning to Mr. Trump would be. And I think there are two ways to look at it, Tucker. One is sort of, can you believe that these are the questions, and don't they trespass on the president's obvious rights and duties as president? And the other question is, I would have, agreeing with Byron York, is that all there is? Remember now, we've been told by so many for so long that we don't know what we don't know, which is sort of obvious if you think about it, but that Mueller may have things we haven't heard about.
Yes.
He may have uncovered things we've never heard about. Nothing in these questions relates to anything we haven't yet heard about. You know, we'd certainly sit up and take notice if among these questions were one that asked about the president's conversations with a certain Russian representative or agent that we'd never heard of before. We'd say, whoa, it looks as if Mr. Mueller's onto something. Now, it may be, Tucker, that lurking in potential follow-up questions to those that are listed here, that there will be some sort of new information. But on the face of it, there's really not much here. And if this is all there is,
I totally agree. No, it's complete. I mean, you expect the question, what about that night in Azerbaijan in '85 or something? But this sounds like a cable news segment, these questions. They're totally general and airy. I was confused by reading them. Do you have any idea where they're going?
Well, I just think that it looks to me like they relate to everything that's been discussed and uncovered so far. And then the question has been raised about whether, when he asks about some of these certain Russian representative or agent that we've never heard of before, we'd say, whoa, it looks as if Mr. Mueller's onto something. Now, it may be, Tucker, that lurking in potential follow-up questions to those that are listed here, that there will be some sort of new information. But on the face of it, there's really not much here. And if this is all there is,
I totally agree. No, it's complete. I mean, you expect the question, what about that night in Azerbaijan in '85 or something? But this sounds like a cable news segment, these questions. They're totally general and airy. I was confused by reading them. Do you have any idea where they're going?
Well, I just think that it looks to me like they relate to everything that's been discussed and uncovered so far. And then the question has been raised about whether, when he asks about some of these business deals, whether they're getting into his red flag area that he said would, lead him possibly to fire the investigator. I'm not sure that's true, and I think one of the things that Trump might end up having to say to Mueller is, well, why did you fire Comey? Remember, Rod Rosenstein sent a letter telling Comey he was out. And it listed a bunch of things that dated back to the Hillary Clinton investigation, in which he said there was improper usurpation of the Justice Department's rightful functions. And then Trump was later asked on NBC about the reasons for firing Comey, and he said, well, I was going to fire him anyway, and it indicated that it was about the Russia investigation. Well, that's a valid line of questioning, obviously. If you're firing the guy to try to stomp on the investigation, that's a serious matter. But I think there's an alternative explanation for that, which I think is quite possibly valid, which is Comey had said to Trump 3 times, I think it was 2 or 3 times, that Trump was not under investigation. Well, he asked him to say that publicly, and Comey and the FBI wouldn't do it. Well, if you were Trump, or if I were me and I were in that situation, it would infuriate me. I think there's information out there that would be exculpatory, and they won't allow it to go out, leaving this cloud over the presidency. So, these are all things that Trump could say. I think properly prepared by lawyers and disciplined in his approach, the president probably could handle all these questions. I didn't see anything in there that looked particularly scary.
So let me get your very quick response to a story I keep reading, which is a series of attacks on General Kelly, the chief of staff over at the White House, suggesting that he's at war with Trump, he's about to be replaced. Are these stories real? Are they planted by his enemies? Is that going to happen?
Well, they have, to me at least, the earmarks of stories planted by his enemies, because if you're trying to bring down Kelly, right, how would you do that? You would make Trump furious with him. And so you put the word out that he has from time to time referred to Trump as an idiot. I can kind of understand how a disciplined, military-minded organization man like John Kelly dealing with Trump, who is, Trump is a man-child. He does what he wants a lot of the time, sometimes to his own detriment. He might infuriate you, and you might, under your breath, or maybe in a room full of intimate aides, say, "Oh, the guy's being an idiot about this," right? So you would leak that, not to hurt Trump. You'd leak that to hurt Kelly, which is how it looks to me. I don't know, of course, and the only people who know that are the people who know who the sources are.
That's exactly what it looks like to me. He seems like a very decent man and an effective chief of staff. That's my impression. Britt, thank you.
Yeah, and someone that Trump respected, which was important.
Yeah, very. Thanks a lot. Britt Hume, appreciate it. Well, hundreds of members of that migrant caravan are still camped on the border. It's a crisis. It's brewing. We'll bring an update to you on that coming up next. Somehow, with no vote being taken, has become federal law and commands us to let them in, no questions asked. Watch.
A very public test of American resolve over immigration policy, as well as the limits of American compassion.
These are the faces of the desperate, locked out on the doorstep of the United States waiting.
The president said, "Have you seen this caravan? Have you seen the caravan?" I ask you, Mr. President, have you?
We continue this discussion.
The Statue of Liberty would say if you met them?
Come on in. Let me help you out.
Look, how do people that dumb get TV jobs? So I guess they're just passing them out. Over at CNN, meanwhile, United Shades of America host Camo Bell has gone even farther than that. He says that all borders everywhere are immoral.
This idea of borders and walls is ridiculous. We're too good for this. The point is, walls suck. This $3 billion manifestation of irrational fear stoked by politicians running for elected office is made of concrete barriers, steel beams, double-layered fencing, and barriers fit for the beaches of Normandy. Welcome to America's Got Talent, but it's wasting it on building this wall.
Here's a guy. I want to ask, do you lock your door? You got a password on your email? Why, it's just a manifestation of fear, I guess. Well, CNN and NBC operate out of America. They cover American news. Americans work there, but they are not interested in the interests of Americans, obviously. Ethan Behrman is a California radio host, and he joins us tonight. So, Ethan, I assume, like every good progressive, you're for letting the members of the caravan in. And I just want to be clear, I'm not against the members. I would want to come here, too, if I lived in Honduras. I understand completely. But it raises the question, since they're not the only people who want to come here, where do you draw the line? What's the limit for people seeking a better life coming to this country?
Well, we have great capacity to accept people into our country, and it follows the Judeo-Christian ethic and morals that we would help those who are less fortunate. Plus, we also signed the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees, which actually sets forth the three aspects of how we determine who to let from violent gangs, and they're coming here to get a better life. And by the way, we have
and in some cases joining violent gangs that our government refuses to protect us from. So it is kind of the circle of life in some ways. But let me just ask you more precisely about what the limit is. So there are 1.2 billion people in Africa, probably 1 billion fall into the categories you just described. How many have a right to come here? What is our capacity?
Well, up until now, I mean, we've been able to absorb roughly 1 million people legally immigrating into the United States every year.
Right.
We know that under President Obama, it was over 100,000 refugees every year that we were able to allow in as well. So we can absorb. I mean, by the way, this caravan
wait, hold on. Before you make generalizations, I want to get specific. So those, you're right with those numbers. Those are basically the numbers. And then various people come in under other programs. So it's maybe 1.5 million a year legally. We've done this for a long time. But the left is saying that's way too restrictive. So what's the number? I mean, again, let's stipulate 1 billion people want to move here next week, probably all to San Diego. How many should we let in under the Judeo-Christian ethic that you're citing?
Well, and this is also part of the Judeo-Christian ethic, would be to help their governments become better functioning, and this is where foreign aid comes into play.
Let's not dodge the question. We spend, come on. There's no evidence that our foreign aid has ever made any government better. I wish it were true, but it's not. Life expectancy in a lot of Africa is lower than it was in 1965 when the colonial powers left. So it doesn't necessarily work that way, as you know. But what's the number? Like, how many? Because this is going to keep happening. With every wave, it incites more waves. And when can we say enough? When are we allowed to say that's too many?
Well, Well, first things first, I mean, I will answer your question as well, which I think is that 1.5 million number. But at the same time, the Trump administration has dramatically cut back on the number of legal immigration. That is, Syrian refugees, we let 11 in so far this year, as opposed to 15,000. 750,000 people have died in Syria. That's
one category.
The most clear example of helping refugees.
Okay.
What's that, Tucker?
But these are on the margins. Again, is there a number, or does talking about it scare the crap out of the country and reveal your real agenda, which is to totally overwhelm and change the country? Because that really is what it's about, as you know. I mean, you don't want to be honest about what the limit is? Is it just kind of like, as long as our compassion lasts? Honest, it's a sincere question.
I actually just answered. I mean, I think that 1.5 million number is
so we just keep it
pretty
there.
Fair.
1.5. That's. You know,
I think that.
So that'll continue. That'll make the country totally unrecognizable in 30 years, but not in 5 years. So that's enough. Is 1.5 million. I mean, I don't think that's what the left is arguing for, because they're saying that we can't turn anyone down.
The country is. But Tucker, the country is unrecognizable from what it was in 1900, from 1800.
It's true. You're right.
We're all strangers in a strange land, and we have to remember that we are a country of immigrants, of people who were refugees and asylum seekers.
No, we're not. We're actually a country. That's where you're wrong. We're a country of Americans. We're a country of Americans. We're not a country of immigrants, not of foreign nationals pledging allegiance to multiple countries simultaneously. We're a country of Americans who are many different colors, many different religions, but we're Americans. And when you stop acknowledging that, that's when things fall apart into this mosaic of tribal warfare, as you know. So why does no one ever say that?
Because, I mean, let's be honest. So Carlson, I don't know if that's Norwegian or German, but remember, we didn't allow Germans to teach German to their kids. And that was a Supreme Court case that had to be settled in the early 20th century, because we have this issue where we don't like people who are different from us
racist.
At the time.
Okay,
and then
so
they become part
this
of
is
our country,
punishment for our racism. Okay. I love it, because the longer these conversations go on, the more you get to the beating heart of the truth, which is, this is punishment. That's really what this is. As you know,
so Tucker, come on. All the studies have shown the 4 Ds of the jobs that refugees and asylum seekers take actually benefit the economy within 5 years upon arrival. All of the studies have shown a positive economic impact in the regions.
I just want to say, unfortunately, we're out of time, but let me just say, as someone who does this for a living, that's totally untrue. Text me those studies, and we'll talk about it next week and go through them forensically. It'll be fun. Ethan, we're out of time. It's great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
The U.S. appears to be lurching much closer to conflict with Iran. Is that a good idea? We'll tell you next. Also, a real-life Pocahontas descendant. We found one, and she says the president's use of the word Pocahontas against Elizabeth Warren is not a racial slur. Huh. We're going to meet her in just a minute. We're excited here. We hope you are too. Well, the Israeli government unveiled a huge trove of intelligence on Iran on Monday night. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made the case that Iran lied when it negotiated a 2015 nuclear deal. Sounds right. The revelations appear to increase the chances that the Trump administration will repudiate the Iran deal, which the president, of course, ran against. That could put the U.S., though, on the path to yet another military venture in that region. Is that in our strategic interest? Colonel Doug McGregor is a retired Army colonel. He's author of the book Margin of Victory, which is excellent, and he joins us tonight. Colonel, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So let's start with a simple question first. And I'm assuming that all of this intel is real, and I certainly never assume good faith on the part of Iran, obviously. Is it in our strategic interest to have a conflict with Iran?
Well, I think the answer is pretty clearly no.
Well, that's not the impression you get from listening to, for example, Nikki Haley. Many Republicans in the Congress, a lot of Democrats, seem to believe that it's essential that the United States goes to war.
Well, I think we have a case here of the proverbial tail wagging the dog. We have 2 smaller allies. One is Tel Aviv, the other is Riyadh. Both of them clearly would like to see Iran end up as a smoking ruin at some point. And whatever they can do to persuade us to abandon this joint comprehensive plan of action, they will do, in the hopes that that then will clear away the obstacle to direct military confrontation.
But again, and by the way, let me just say, I understand why both of them would want that. I don't begrudge them that. I would want that too if I were them.
Yes.
But what effect would that have on the United States? That's my main interest as an American.
Well, first of all, if you go to war, you're in territory that is very hard to predict. In other words, Iran is not isolated. Iran is not alone. And we don't have China, for instance, telling the leader of North Korea, shut up and do business with the United States, which is effectively what happened with Xi. And that, by the way, is a brilliant achievement by the president. I hope he focuses on that and not this particular issue right now. But we don't have anything like that. And the Iranians and the Russians have drawn very closely together. The Chinese are in the background, but they're doing a land office business with Iran and oil and gas. The Europeans look at us and are dismayed because from their vantage point, it's not Iran, it's the Sunni Islamist Arabs and Turks, stupid. That's where you should be focused.
But
and
why
that's
wouldn't
what you
that be
should worry
true
about.
for us as well? I don't remember a lot of Shiite-inspired terror attacks on our soil, and I keep hearing that Iran, which I'm not in any way defending, and I wouldn't choose to live there, but I keep hearing they're the greatest threat to Americans, but it seems like all the terror attacks in this country are Sunni.
Absolutely. No, there's no question about that. And again, look, if you're interested in securing your country against that kind of thing, you defend your borders, you get control of immigration. We forget that 9/11 crew came here legally, became illegal, was never tracked, and was able to do what they did as
Were they agents of Iran?
No, of course not. They were agents of, well, they were Sunni Arab Islamists, largely from Saudi Arabia and North Africa.
Right. So why wouldn't we see that as the threat? Because consistently over time it has been. Why is everyone saying exactly the opposite of what's so clearly true?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that our two allies in Tel Aviv and Saudi Arabia are absolutely determined to halt what they consider to be the onward march of Iranian influence.
Right.
And that influence is confined right now largely, not exclusively, but largely to Syria and Iraq. We forget, of course, that we installed Iran in power in Iraq. We created the conditions conducive to that. That was not something Iran did. And when it comes to Syria, the Iranians have worked closely with the Russians and Assad to defeat the Sunni Islamist opposition to them. And they've been successful. That war is effectively over. So the bottom line is they want us to effectively reverse the strategic outcomes of the last, 15, 16 years. That's not possible, frankly, without a major war. And I don't think that President Trump is interested remotely under any circumstances in going to war. But the GC, or this Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, is the last obstacle on the road to war.
Keep American interest foremost in mind, because that's the point of the U.S. government. Of course. Colonel, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Well, the state of California is obviously falling apart. It's sad to watch. Crime is growing. Junkies shoot up in public, literally. Increasingly, some people say that parts of California look like those countries that President Trump once described with a foul word, holes. It's bad. Who's trying to fix it? We'll talk to a major California politician next. San Francisco is one of the richest cities in the world, and it's got to be in one of the 2 or 3 prettiest. It's really, really pretty. But you can't really live there anymore. We aired a video last night that showed vagrants shooting up or lying passed out in their own vomit in the middle of a BART, a train station, right downtown outside the Civic Center, 2 blocks from Twitter headquarters. Local reporters have found needles and human feces on every single block in downtown San Francisco. One estimate says that the city spends about $30 million a year just cleaning up needles and human waste. As an added bonus to this, the city is suffering from an epidemic of car break-ins. There were more than 30,000 of those just last year. Joe Alioto Veronese is running for DA of San Francisco, and he joins us tonight. Joe, I know you're a lifelong resident of that city, of course.
That's right.
And I sort of wonder how the people in charge, as they commute on BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, don't notice the junkies shooting up in the station. What do they think when they pass those people doing that?
Well, we've reached a point in San Francisco, I think it's really a threshold point where it's not just at BART. You can walk down Market Street, as you mentioned, Twitter, the new district down there that was non-existent about 10 years ago, but because the tax break brought all of the Twitter people in at higher incomes and pushed a lot of people out onto the street. 70% of the people that are homeless in San Francisco were actually not homeless 5 years ago. But what we did was we abandoned a homeless policy that was actually working when the new administration came in. Under Gavin Newsom, there was a very effective homeless policy, but when the new administration came in, many of those people got pushed to the streets, especially with some of those larger income jobs. And And you find the last time you and I spoke, we talked about, you know, focusing on the middle income. Well, the middle income in San Francisco and the lower income people, there's a very small delta between those people because the lower income people are living in lower rent apartments because they've been there for a longer time and they're protected. And then you get these Twitter people that are coming in and making $150,000 to $200,000 a year who are also living paycheck to paycheck because they're paying for the same apartments. They're paying $5,000 or $6,000.
Well, I think
more.
everything you're saying is clearly right. I mean, the housing shortage and the geography of the city makes it always a tight housing market. But I also am asking a more basic question about what the leaders of the city care about. If you walk to work and you see people degrading themselves, defecating on the street, shooting up, why wouldn't that horrify you to the point that you would drop what you're doing and fix it? And instead, they're lecturing the rest of us about how we're immoral because we don't want more illegal aliens in the state of California. It just seems like their priority is totally backward. They don't care about their own people. Why wouldn't you reach that conclusion?
Well, I don't think it's that they don't care. I think the problem is that they don't know how to fix it. Some of the progressive values in San Francisco, you know, is that what they do as some of these politicians is that they create new institutions, new entitlements around problems that they see because old departments and new departments as well, but old departments aren't solving the specific problems. The Department of Health, for example, which has a $3 billion budget in San Francisco, that was the entire city budget not 15, 20 years ago. And now we're up to $10 billion, actually probably just over $10 billion. But what, as the mayor last week, what he did was he said, okay, we've got this needle problem, so what we're going to do is we're going to hire 10 new people, and we're going to give the San Francisco AIDS Foundation the budget for 10 new people.
Oh, I bet.
Well, those 10 people aren't going to go away. Instead of hiring 10 new people, because you can imagine what that would look like, right? Firing 10 people from the San Francisco AIDS Foundation that were hired to pick up needles. Well, instead of hiring 10 new people and creating a new institution around it, like we did with the new homeless department in San Francisco, why aren't we looking at the Department of Health and saying, hey, these are people on the street with opiate problems. These are people on the street with mental health problems. You have a $3 billion budget. This should be within your budget to fix.
But I agree. I actually agree with you on that. But wouldn't, I mean, look, think about it in terms of your own children. If you said to your kids, like, you can't do that. You're just not, you know what, how about this? You're not allowed to shoot heroin on the street. I don't care. Maybe you go to someone else's county who will put up with this crap, but we're not putting up with it. Everyone here on Market Street, like, you're gone. What? That's really simple.
Well,
you would do that with your own children. Why aren't you doing it with your own people?
Two things. My child will never be on the street doing opiates and shooting needles into his arms, legs, whatever. That will just never happen because in my family, I grew up in a family where you support your own family. You do anything for your family, and that's very true to you know, Catholics and Italians and stuff like that. Which is why you'd never see that scene, that particular scene.
But shouldn't the city of San Francisco care about its own people? That's the point. They don't care. They're so walled off in their fantasy worlds. They just don't care about actual people who are dying.
It absolutely should, but it's stuck in building these institutions that literally last for years and years and years. That don't solve problems. Now, let me tell you this.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. Give me the one line. Yeah.
The Department of Health in San Francisco has a group of individuals that go out and handful of needles to people. Instead of hiring 10 new people to pick them up, let's take care of those people who are actually giving them out and stop doing it. More accountability in San Francisco is what we need, especially on the crime issues.
You get what you put up with. It's always true. Joe, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, we have a direct descendant of Pocahontas on the show in just a minute, and she is a direct challenge for Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Obviously, you don't want to miss that. We'll be right back.
You wouldn't accept.
Senator Elizabeth Warren runs for president in 2020, and a lot of us are rooting for that because we believe in diversity. You can bet you're going to hear a lot more of President Trump's nickname for her, Pocahontas. Warren says that nickname is racist, but a direct descendant of Pocahontas, who you're about to meet, does not agree. Debbie White Dove Perico says she can trace her lineage right back to Pocahontas, and she is a challenge for Senator Warren. Debbie Perico joins us tonight. Debbie, thank you for coming on. It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
So what is your challenge for, well, we're honored to. What's your challenge for Senator Warren?
Well, my challenge would be that I don't know how she's saying Pocahontas is a racial slur. Pocahontas is a real person.
Well, it seems like a compliment. I mean, when people point out that you're related to Pocahontas, do you take offense?
No, I don't. I don't. I'm proud. I was in a restaurant the other day in Palm Beach, and I was leaving with someone, and the person said, "Oh, you're with Pocahontas." It wasn't offensive to me at all. I was proud that they said that.
So how do you view Senator Warren's claim that she is an American Indian? Do you believe her?
Well, I respect Senator Warren as a U.S. Senator, but I just wish she'd take the DNA test. And if she took the DNA test, then that would end a lot of this controversy.
Yeah.
And if she was part American Indian, I'd be the first one to welcome her into our heritage.
Well, amen. Maybe she's related to Pocahontas, too. I mean, weirder things have happened. Why do you think she won't take the DNA test? It doesn't cost much.
I know. Maybe she's afraid she's not. You know, it's not right. It's offensive that she doesn't take it, but
yeah,
you can't, you know, make somebody take something if they don't want to.
No, of course you can't. But if she were here, you would encourage her to take the DNA test.
Oh, yes. Yes, I would.
Good. Well, she may run for president. You may have other opportunities to encourage her to do that, and we hope you will. In fact, we'll have you on just to remind her if she runs, and she may. Debbie, it's great to see you.
Okay. Oh, good to see you too, Tucker.
Thanks. Have a great night.